Welcome to Lesson 2 of our training module entitled My Carbon Footprint. In this lesson, we will discuss with you who in the world is calculating their carbon footprint, and more importantly, why they are doing it. For you and me, we are doing it to become aware of our footprint and to inform others. But for almost all companies and organizations in the world, it has become law to audit and report on their emissions. Countries of the world have been divided up into two categories, namely developed and developing nations. Developed nations are countries like England, Holland and Japan, where almost all the citizens have formal housing with water, sewage and electricity. In developing nations like South Africa, Brazil, India and China, there are many citizens who do not have homes, let alone access to electricity and water. It was Allen M. Edison that said, "Modern technology owes ecology an apology." It is somewhat obvious that since the beginning of the industrial age, some countries developed infrastructure for cities like road and rail networks, as well as factories to produce food and clothing for its people. In doing so, a lot of fossil fuel like coal, oil and gas were used to power motors and engines, and in doing so they emitted greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. As nobody wants to stop the development of these poorer nations, it has been decided that the developed nations need to cut their emissions now, and that more time must be given to underdeveloped nations before they need to be held accountable for their own emissions. It has also been agreed upon that skills in technology regarding the reduction of emissions need to be transferred freely between these nations. We are, however, finding that numerous businesses in all developing countries are already doing their bit by auditing their emissions and making them public, along with their commitments to reduce. The increase of greenhouse gases above the 350 parts per million has become such a serious global issue that many scientists and politicians are making it their highest priority. Various conferences around the world are dealing with this issue, the main one being the Conference of the Parties, or COP, as it is more commonly known. The first COP was held in Berlin in 1995. The second one was the following year in Geneva, and the third and probably the most important one to date was the one in Kyoto, Japan, where the Kyoto Protocol was agreed upon. The protocol was initially adopted in December 1997 and entered into force in February 2005. As of October 2009, 184 states have signed and ratified the protocol, which legally binds them to reductions in greenhouse gases of an average of 5.2% below 1990 levels in the time period between 2008 until 2012. The only major developed nation that has not signed the protocol is the United States of America. George W. Bush, the president at the time of the signing, opposed the treaty because of the strain he believed the treaty would put on the economy. He also emphasized the uncertainties which he believed were present in the scientific evidence relating to global warming. As we all know, George Bush is no longer president of the United States. President Obama is the newly elected leader. He is very much in agreement with scientific evidence that global warming is anthropogenic, meaning created largely by human activities. Although they did not sign the Kyoto Treaty, many organizations are growing from strength to strength, getting major role players to commit on paper in legally binding documents to reduce emissions. One such organization is called 1010, and their aim was to convince people to join, to commit to reducing emissions of greenhouse gases by 10% by the year 2010. Within the United States of America, the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement is a pledge by mayors to reduce global warming pollution in their cities by 7% below 1990 levels by the year 2012. As of October 2009, over 1,000 mayors from 50 states, representing over 85 million Americans, have signed the Climate Protection Agreement. Let us now take a closer look at the Kyoto Protocol and what it means to our planet. The objective of the Kyoto Climate Change Conference was to establish a legally binding international agreement whereby all the participating nations commit themselves to tackling the issue of global warming and greenhouse gas emissions. The target agreed upon was an average reduction of 5.2% from 1990 levels by the year 2012. The Kyoto Protocol is a protocol to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or UNFCCC, an international environmental treaty with the goal of achieving stabilization of greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere at a level that would prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. The Kyoto Protocol establishes a legally binding commitment from its signatories for the reduction of 4 greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur hexafluoride, and 2 groups of gases, namely hydrofluorocarbons and perfluorocarbons, produced by industrialized nations. As of October 2009, 184 states have signed and ratified the protocol, which entered into force on 16 February 2005. Although the average reduction is 5.2%, national limitations range from the reduction of 8% for the European Union and others, 6% for Japan, 0% for Russia. The treaty permitted emission increases of 8% for Australia and 10% for Iceland. What this means is that the leaders of 37 countries have handed down targets per sector. For instance, Germany must be reduced by 8%. The government then stipulates, for instance, that manufacture must be reduced by 15%, transport by 9%, telecommunications by 7%, and so on. If, for instance, Volkswagen must be reduced by 15% and only manages 12%, they can either buy carbon credits to make up the difference, or else they need to pay penalties and fines. Buying carbon credits is the cheaper option, and we will cover this in much greater detail in our module number 12, entitled Carbon Credit Trading. We will all be focusing on South Africa at the end of 2011, when the Conference of the Parties will be held again to determine future reduction targets after 2012. World leaders and scientists are going to push for a new post-Kyoto treaty in South Africa. By far the most discussed report on climate change is the Stern Review, which was released by the British government. The 700-page report goes into detail about the effect of global warming on the world economy, a summary of which you can view or download from our website. The report estimates that within a short period of 50 years, there is a 50% chance of a 5-degree rise in worldwide temperature. That inaction would cost the world economy 20% of GDP, but that the cost of tackling it would only cost 1% of GDP. Ever since this report was released in 2006, the world of manufacture and business has had a giant wake-up call. Companies have cottoned on to this and have leveraged to their advantage by being transparent through their reporting on and reducing their own GHG emissions. The evidence of this is very apparent in the form of the Global 100 listings. Global100.org lists every year the top 100 most sustainable corporations around the world that have been most proactive in managing environmental, social, and governance issues. Part of the zip file that you're going to download for this lesson is spreadsheets for the 2005 until 2010 from Global 100. It is organizations like these that are helping businesses get just rewards for their commitment to measuring and reducing their carbon footprint. Let's now take a closer look at 4 companies that are really serious about sustainability. The first one I would like to discuss is HSBC Holdings Public Limited, a global financial services company headquartered in London, United Kingdom. As of 2010, it is both the world's largest banking and financial services group and the world's 8th largest company, and has around 100 million customers. The group has been carbon neutral since 2005 and every year since. You will see that they appeared in the 2007 edition of the Global 100 listings. The next company is Nedbank, the 4th largest bank in South Africa. The company achieved carbon neutrality across the group's 13 head office and regional buildings and more than 490 branches on the 13th of July 2010. This makes the Nedbank Group the first African financial services organization to achieve effective zero carbon status, and further cements the bank's reputation as one of Africa's environmental sustainability leaders. It was surely no coincidence when the HSBC Group the very next month made an offer to buy up to 70% of Nedbank in a deal worth 50 billion rand. When Nedbank first indicated their intention to aim for carbon neutrality in September 2009, they committed that the group would strive to achieve it as far as possible by means of behavior change, reduction targets which included paper, water, electricity, travel and waste, as well as operational efficiencies. The strategy was to reduce first and offset only when necessary approach, which was born from Nedbank's determination not to buy its neutrality. Nedbank used carbon credits to offset their unavoidable emissions, and these were obtained from a sustainable deforestation project in Kenya known as Rukinga. If we look at what is known as the spaghetti chart, which graphically illustrates the greenhouse gas flow chart for the world's emissions, you will notice that the transport sector is responsible for 13.5%. Automobile manufacturers are all too aware that their industry is being continuously scrutinized and that they need to be leaders instead of laggards when it comes to reducing the emissions their vehicles release, as well as measuring and reducing the emissions created while manufacturing their respective vehicles. The Toyota Prius is the top-selling car in Japan for 16 months in a row as at August 2010. It first went on sale in 1997 and is the first ever mass-produced hybrid vehicle. According to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, it is currently the most fuel-efficient gasoline car currently sold in the US. In May 2008, global cumulative Prius sales reached the milestone 1 million vehicle mark. And in September 2010, the Prius reached worldwide cumulative sales of 2 million units. The age of electric car is finally here. Emissions tax came into force on the 1st of September 2010 in South Africa, with a penalty for new vehicles sold with emissions higher than 120 grams per kilometer. The current penalty is 85.50 Rand per 1 gram over the 120 limit, which converts to green tax income for our government of between 1 and 1.5 billion rands each and every year. Yellow stickers have to be displayed on the windscreen of all new cars, showing details of the vehicle's CO2 emissions, as well as comparative fuel consumption figures. The day when the United States finally switches over to alternative energy will get a little bit closer when Interstate 5, that runs from the Canadian border to Oregon, will become more hospitable to electric vehicles. Those electric vehicles will be able to ride along Interstate 5, the nation's first electric highway, made possible by a hefty $1.32 million federal grant. According to the governor of Washington, the electric highway will boast enough charging stations along its length to support an entire trip for all electric vehicles. Washington plans to install between 7 and 10 so-called Level 3 electric vehicle charging stations along the main north-south road. Level 3 stations charge at 400 volts and 30 amps or more, enabling stations to charge a typical EV battery to 80% full in under 30 minutes. And lastly, I would like to mention BMW, the car and motorbike manufacturer from Germany. According to the Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes, it is the world's most sustainable automobile manufacturer 6 years in a row now. Management of the BMW Group declared sustainability one of the company's core strategic principles in the year 2000 already. And corporate sustainability is entrenched throughout their entire value chain, from the development of fuel-saving and alternative vehicle components to clean production processes and green recycling practices. Dr. Norbert Rutherford, chairman of the board of management at BMW, stated the following in late 2010. For us, it means accepting responsibility as a good corporate citizen. It motivates us to continue along this path towards our vision of sustainable individual mobility. Carbon footprinting is a huge issue for the well-being of our planet and for future generations. The world is taking the seriousness of climate change and global warming and prioritizing the reduction in emissions as we have no choice. There is so much that we can do in our lives and that of our communities to assist world governments and countries to participate in these changes. We are the change we need to see in the world, and as expressed by the Hopis, a group of indigenous Native American people who primarily live on the Hopi Reservation in northeastern Arizona. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We get caught up in politics and sit in our homes and comment and dictate about the changes that need to happen. There are many simple ways that we can all make differences and reduce, change, simplify, create and share knowledge and wisdom to those in our families, our colleagues, and our communities. The information we have given you in this lesson is a very clear indication of the massive changes and decisions that are being made on our behalf. We as members of the planet as our home need to hold our leaders accountable for the changes that they have committed to and be proactive in everything that we do. Now onto your homework for this lesson. I would like you to download our zip file entitled Module 4 Lesson 2 Notes and study the contents before you begin with Lesson 3. We give you homework after almost every lesson to bring you up to speed with news as and when we receive it. And these files cover this and more in detail. I would also like you to watch at least the first video from our website Eco Analysts called Manpolo. And now we are going to end off this lesson with a quote from Paul McCready Jr. Your grandchildren will likely find it incredible or even sinful that you burned up a gallon of gasoline to fetch a pack of cigarettes. And just remember, we do not need to believe in global warming or climate change. We just need to live more sustainably and tread lighter on our Mother Earth. Bye for now.